So really, apps are mini websites. But the user expectations are much higher because people are used to holding things and swiping and gestures and all that. So they want touch and gesture. Great design comes from your imagination, so put yourself in the user's place. What would they find useful, usable, and desirable? Think about how people use the devices. Mobile devices have sensors that are superpowers, like GPS. Microphones, camera, touch, gyroscope, compass. So they expect to be able to use them. So you have to think about that when you're designing your app. Don't confuse context with user intent. If you think people don't want to do something on a mobile device, you're wrong. They'll try it. So if it doesn't work, they're not going to be happy. Your mobile apps should be similar to your websites, have the same content, but of course it's going to flow differently because of the different size of the screen. Design the interface for thumbs and fingers. Where does your thumb come to rest naturally on the screen? Don't obscure the content with the controls. Most smartphone controls are at the bottom of the screen, exactly opposite of your desktop. Where your menu is at the top of your desktop, it's going to be at the bottom on your smartphone, so you have to think about that. Remember your principles of design. These are the 4 most common ones: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Even more important with mobile design, especially for a smartphone because it's small. So use your principles of contrast and proximity especially, and alignment. And remember the grid. You've got line, color, shape, value, space, size, texture, everything you use in designing on your desktop, but in smaller format. Plus, sometimes you can't see the screen as well in daylight. So you need to make sure and use high contrast and bright colors. We see information in a Z pattern. So your eye goes to the number 1 up there, goes across to 2, down 3, over to 4. So proximity means you put your most important information in the number 1 space. So if you're looking at a website for your hospital where you work or a company or something, you're going to see their logo or seal or brand in that number 1 space. Let the visual elements tell a story. Don't use a lot of text, keep it really simple. That's the big thing with mobile development, keep it simple. Use graphics to reinforce the message, but not to repeat it. You can use device-agnostic production processes. It's really easy now. So you design once and it'll display correctly on any device. You can go to W3C website, which is the Web Consortium, and they have all kinds of literature you can download, style sheets, all kinds of things for responsive web design and anything you're looking for. Also, usability.gov has some really good information. When you're designing your menu, don't overwhelm the user with too many choices because they tend to go down rabbit holes. For us at work, we have to design for everybody from the warfighter in the field to the president. And especially the president and those higher level people, they have 2 seconds to look at something. So you want to make it very simple. Your users may be different, but if you're designing for somebody who has very little time, don't give them too many choices because they will go down that rabbit hole. Make all your design elements consistent. So if you have a button that goes somewhere and it's purple, make all of the buttons that go somewhere purple. SVG graphics work well because they're 2-dimensional vector graphics. So they can zoom in on them, move them, everything, and they won't degrade. Use TIFF or large JPEG for images, PNG for line art, and logos, and your video format's going to be MP4. Spacing's tricky on a mobile device. You have to have enough padding or white space to separate the elements, but you don't want too much because then you'll waste space in that small space you have to work with. Group related items and distinguish them from a different group by separation of vertical and horizontal space. Again, the grid. Use cues to indicate grouping. So if you have a group of buttons that do the same thing or go together, make them all the same. Use rounded corners, whatever. But keep it simple. Don't get too fancy. You don't need drop shadows or anything. Different colors can communicate a change of context. You want to use at least 12-point font or use pixels, ems, or rems, which are based on percentages. And that's all done automatically in the software now. So if you're not into coding like I'm not, we have developers that do that. Our designers use Dreamweaver, Edge, Muse, and it's all automatic. You can just pick your properties. Your type must be large enough to read easily with enough space between the lines, the lettering, so that it doesn't feel cramped. Don't use skinny or extra fancy fonts because they're going to be hard to see on a mobile device, especially a smartphone, especially outside. So use the simplest web-safe fonts you can find. Your buttons need to be big enough for a finger to touch. So 50 to 55 pixels is a good rule of thumb. And leave enough space in between them so they don't touch the wrong one. Okay, above the fold. Everybody knows what above the fold is, right? Your most important information goes above the halfway point on the screen, just like a newspaper. These are examples of grids. You can download templates which are changeable and stuff. You can find anything on the web. These are just some samples of grid patterns that I saw online. And most of them you can change and move them around. So if you're designing for a desktop, you may want to use one of the ones with 3 columns. But for a smartphone, you're going to probably use 1 column. But like I said, when you're designing that in Dreamweaver or other software, you're going to set it up to, you can click, just check whatever kind of device you're going to use, and the screen size, and it will automatically flow. So when you go from a desktop to a smartphone, on desktop you might see a 3-column layout, but when you see the same thing on a smartphone, it'll be a 1-column layout, and everything will just flow underneath it. There's the fold. I'm going quickly, sorry. If you have any questions, just stop me. This is just some examples of grid. You can see the columns set up here. Feel free to go across 2 columns for a headline or a picture or whatever. This is going to keep your design simple and easy for the eye to follow. There's another one. So you can see on the top picture here, they've gone across the whole page. So they're using all 4 columns. So obviously that's their most important information. It's above the grid. On one of their other pages, they were trying to get students to enroll, so that's what they had up there. Another sample of using the grid. This is the design once published for any device, so device agnostic. So you can see how the content looks different on different devices. It's called responsive or fluid design. The key to responsive design when you're building it is to position the same divs for best display in each of the 3 layouts. But Dreamweaver's going to do that for you automatically. Here's the code behind it, if anybody's interested. If you look at it, you can see the grid pattern in yellow. Grid is 12, and there's an 8, and there's a 4. So what it's going to do is follow that pattern specifically based on the device that the user is using. And that's called media query. In your coding in Dreamweaver or just about any other kind of software or raw HTML, if you were doing raw HTML, you would put this in there, but all this other software does it for you. So you can see that you've got your different screen sizes here. So your media query in CSS, it's going to sense what the user is using, and it's going to give them whatever size their display is. So if you really want to get into coding besides HTML, you can use JavaScript, learn CSS3. That's really important. That's your style sheets, just like in InDesign. And you can do mobile development with InDesign now, too. It's really easy. Bootstrap is another variation. D3 is a JavaScript library. And Leaflet is for maps. So your work would look kind of like Google Maps. And there's tons of it out there. Most of it's free. If you like coding, there's tons of educational opportunities like Code Academy, W3C has a training website. Kids are way better at this stuff than we are because they've grown up with it. And
well, now they do it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities for kids and teenagers to get into coding now. It's really easy for them. It's like learning another language like Spanish or something. And like at our local college, they have summer school for kids as young as first and second grade to learn coding. It's crazy. For me, it's like looking at Greek. It's difficult for me, but my kids just go, oh, just do this and this and this. I'm like, okay. So no coding required for some of the newer software. Even the Dreamweaver that's a couple versions old, it can do it easily. And that's it.